friends! My name is Antoinette Chanel and welcome back to my channel. In this video, I want to talk about the books that I read during January 2025. I came into the new year wanting to set a new habit of reading again. I wanted to get away from doom scrolling on my phone, get away from constantly consuming headlines and looking for gossip and things like that. I mean, of course, I still love gossip, don't get me wrong, but I wanted to establish some constructive habits as I came into 2025. So I set a goal to start reading more and learning more and just giving my brain a break at times from digital screens and just, looking at regular pages with print on them. And part of the reason I did this was because I could feel my brain not working the same way that it used to. Now, part of that is age, but part of that is also because of technology. And I got confirmation of this in one of the books that I actually listened to on audiobook during the month of January, which was called Stolen Focus by Johann Hari. In the book, Johann Hari starts off by talking about how he was visiting with one of his nephews, and his nephew wouldn't put his phone down. He was constantly looking at the phone. They went to a museum, and instead of people looking up at the things that were on display in the museum, everybody was looking at their phone and had AirPods in or headphones because they were listening to what the museum people were telling them and looking at a screen to show them what the artifacts were, even though they were right there in the museum with the art. I won't give spoilers for these books. There definitely are books on this list that I think that everyone should check out, and there's some books on this list that I started and I did not finish because they didn't hold my attention, just being honest. But if you are someone who feels like you're definitely not the same after being a social media user, after, interacting with the internet for however many years, after being exposed to modern technology, then I'd say that this book is definitely worth a read, worth a listen. It's amazing the way that Hari is able to confirm a lot of the suspicions that I'm sure most of us have had about the role that social media is playing in shaping human behavior. Things like what people are talking about, things like what people are voting for, things like what people are protesting about. Next, I read Happiness Becomes You by Tina Turner. I picked that book up purely by chance. I saw it on display at my library and I thought, oh, I didn't know she wrote a self-help book. Let me check this one out. I really enjoyed Tina Turner's book. It was fun to get more insights into who she was as a person. I've always enjoyed her as an entertainer, but I would say that her music sort of missed me in terms of like when I was born and what my age was and when she was releasing stuff. So I've always been aware of Tina Turner, but I don't think that I was ever in her target age group when she was producing her music, which that's fine. That's okay. My parents listened to her a lot, so I definitely heard her on radio speakers as I was growing up and into adulthood. I'm exploring where I'm landing when it comes to faith, and that's probably as far as I'm going to go on that. But I will say that Tina Turner's book actually inspired me to pick up the Lotus Sutra because I was curious about it, and she was a very devout Buddhist. Next, I picked up Year of Wonders by Geraldine Brooks, but I couldn't get past page 5 when I was reading it. It was super boring. I took that one back to the library having not read it at all. Then I read a book called How to Be Fine. The authors of that are Jolenta Greenberg and Kristen Meinzer. And apparently these two women host a podcast called By the Book, where they take self-help books and they practice the advice that's given in the self-help book for 2 weeks, and then they report back on what the results are that they get. So as you can imagine, some of it is positive, some of it is negative. I enjoyed How to Be Fine. I thought that giving honest opinions and feedback about some of the stuff that gets sold in these self-help books is refreshing. I liked it. It also seemed like the purpose of the book was for both of the authors to let people know that, you don't necessarily have to stick to these really strict regimens or, transform your life and how you talk about things, in a Marie Kondo kind of way. Like, you don't have to do that in order to be a fine person. If you just want to be more aware of, how much junk you're holding on to, or how often you skip the gym, or, how often you are binge eating or drinking or whatever the case may be, that's just fine as well. Like, we don't need to strive for perfection. Striving for progress and being healthy and happy is really, really good. So I would say the women gave excellent permission and advice for how to be fine. I enjoyed that. The sticking point for me with this book was that it seemed like both women just had a very radical take on Don Miguel Ruiz's The Four Agreements, which was one of the books that they read as part of the content for their podcast and for this book. I love The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. I mean, I think it's a great book. It's nice and short, sweet. I mean, do I practice it 1000% to a T? No, but I don't think that Don Miguel Ruiz had any ill intentions with the advice that he dispensed in that book. And I know plenty of people who've been positively touched by those words, including myself. Both Greenberg and Meinzer claim that the Four Agreements is asking us to remove responsibility from other people. So when he says that we shouldn't take anything personally, the authors seemed to resonate with that in a way that he was saying that, like, we need to blame everything on everybody else. And that has never been the take that I've gotten from that book. And I first read The Four Agreements, 15 years ago. And there are several other people who have read The Four Agreements and didn't have that take. So I just thought it was really wild the way both of them seem to be, in my opinion, misconstruing Don Miguel Ruiz's words and purpose and intentions. But people are people. If that's how they took it, that's fine. We don't have to agree on everything. But that was one part of How to Be Fine that turned me off, was that when they would bring up the Four Agreements, the way that they talked about it and how harmful they found that book to be, I couldn't relate to it. I found the opposite in the Four Agreements. I found that book to be very nourishing for my soul. I was recommended to listen to the book How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell, which I was able to find through Libby, and I listened to part of it, but it was so boring. I didn't like it, so I didn't finish that one either. I feel like a lot of the messaging in Jenny Odell's book was probably covered in Johann Hari's book, so I think I got some form of that. But yeah, I have a friend who really, really enjoyed How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell and recommended it to me, but I just found it so boring. I didn't want to listen to it. Maybe it was the person who was reading the audiobook. I don't know. I wasn't engaged. Against White Feminism by Rafia Zakaria. This book was surprisingly refreshing and eye-opening for me. I have struggled for a really long time to place, well, not even place. I don't like feminism, white feminism, which is all feminism, let's be honest. I think that feminism is very manipulative, especially of women of color. I think feminism is something that white women constructed to make themselves feel good and nobody else. So I've always taken issue with feminism. And in this last election cycle, especially, I felt like feminists were going really, really hard at trying to bring in all of the women of color, trans women, women with disabilities. And I just wasn't buying it. I wasn't feeling it. It felt so performative and transactional and just icky. I didn't like it. As a Black woman in the United States, it is always appalling to me to see what they think. First of all, how they define who we are, because a lot of people seem to think that if you are a Black woman in the United States, then that means that you must be Cardi B. I'm not sure when she became the mascot for representing Black women like me, but I really, really hate it. And then no one's really interested in our identities, our plight, our stories. All they're interested in is getting a whole bunch of free labor out of us. And I just really love the way that Zakaria is able to capture all of the ways that white feminism just completely misunderstands women of color. It makes caricatures out of us. The idea of representation and diversity, equity, and inclusion is usually that white women will invite some woman of color to be on display and be a mascot for something, Tell us about the fun foods that you make and tell us about the fun scarves that you wear. But no one's really looking under the surface to see, culturally, what are these women facing that's different from what we are facing? It doesn't usually get that far. The conversation usually stops at, hey, that's cool. You're different. And so white feminism's definition of sexual liberation and how that goes against what a lot of Muslim women believe and practice, and how this idea of sexual liberation is, it sounds nice to some people, but it might not be what other women in these conversations are looking for. Other women not wanting to be free and open and wild about their sexuality does not somehow mean that they are stuck in the past or backwards or that they need to be liberated. But I learned a lot. I learned about how, the war in Iraq and the coverage of it, the idea of these honor killings within Muslim communities and how those get reported on. It was very eye-opening. And so if you are somebody who is a woman of color who's taken issue with white feminism before, this is definitely a book for you. I'm gonna see if I can find out more about Rafia Zakaria. I listened to the audiobook Courtiers by Valentine Lowe, and I did that partially for some research I was doing for my snarking videos on Meghan Markle, but that book was very eye-opening as well. Valentine Lowe is a seasoned British journalist, and it's very important to note that he released the report about Meghan's bullying at Buckingham Palace before the Oprah interview dropped in 2021. He also released Courtiers before Spare dropped in January 2023. I actually have a two-part series on this channel talking more in depth about the things that I learned in Courtiers. It contains spoilers, so if you don't want those, you're gonna wanna skip it. But if you wanna hear more about Courtiers, you can check out my video series. I read Joyful by Nature by Nyla Blades. This is the first time I'd ever read anything by that author. And I really enjoyed how she was able to talk about the need for Black women, especially, to utilize nature as a means for reconnecting with our peace, with our whole being, and just finding grounding and calm. I thought it was so beautiful. So in addition to talking about all of the benefits of spending time in nature on mental health, physical health, overall well-being, Nyla also includes activities that you can do in your journal that talk about just what your priorities are and what your vision is for the future and how you see yourself, and just kind of coming home to oneself and being grounded and comfortable and safe, which I think is so huge and powerful for Black women. I think that there could not be enough material that gets put out about how Black women can better take care of themselves, because we need that guidance. There's no other social group in society who is looking out for us. We have to look out for ourselves first and foremost. And I like that Nyla Blades really empowers Black women to do that through reconnecting with nature. I'm also an earth sign, so just, reading a book all about how getting out into nature and walking barefoot on grass and, taking in sunrises and sunsets and how good that is for the soul. I love that kind of stuff. And last but certainly not least, I listened to the audiobook Men Have Called Her Crazy by Anna Marie Tendler. Anna Marie Tendler is the ex-wife of comedian John Mulaney. If you don't know the story about John Mulaney and his rehab and how he fell into Olivia Munn, go look that up for yourself. But it's very interesting to hear the other side of that whole tale as it's told by Anna Marie, as she also entered rehab around the same time that John did, and they went through a divorce. I want to give praise for the fact that Anna Marie kept her book about her and only about her. Well, and also about her pet, Petunia. Those are all my reads for January 2025. Let me know, were you reading books in the first month of this year? If so, I'd love to hear what you were reading. If you have suggestions, I'd love to hear those too below if you want to leave a comment. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, only if you liked it. And if you would like to subscribe to this channel to get more of my personal content, how I am keeping the peace and staying focused in the year 2025, then please, I encourage you to stick around. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can at the handle that's listed on screen right there. Otherwise, my friends, thank you so much for joining me, and take care.